It is the 21st century. There are too many video games. But out there, it's waiting. The best video game you've never played.
Hello and welcome to The Best Video Game You've Never Played, the podcast where I, stand-up and improv comedian Lewis Dunn, give my guests suggestions for what I think is the best video game that they have never played. Yes, we flipped the format. We're in this stage of the podcast now. How long will it go on for? As long as I am able to get hold of guests I've already talked to. This week's guest is Mungo Tatton-Brown. He's come back. Last time we chatted, I played The Red Strings Club, which was a psychological, philosophical adventure game all about the nature of mind control and existence, and in return, I have given Mungo a game that I think was one of the most atmospheric and interesting games that I played in the year 2020. What is it? You're going to have to listen/read the title of the podcast to find out, but let's crack on as we now speak to Mungo Tatton-Brown. Hello, Mungo. Welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing?
I am all right. I haven't had a bit of an adventure lately, but I'm not sure whether our guests will be particularly intrigued. Maybe they'll be more intrigued by the mystery of me not saying anything.
That's true. That's true. Because, if anything, Mungo, you saying that there is a mystery that you're not going to fully explain is, in fact, very appropriate for the video game that we're bringing on this time. This is, of course, your return to the podcast, which means after we played the Red Strings Club, I suggested that you should go and play Observation, which is a video game that was released in 2019, so pretty recent. Mm-hmm. It's a game it's an adventure game where you take on the role of Sam, which stands for a Systems Administration and Maintenance Artificial Intelligence. So you play as like the operating system of a space station, and you have to help the astronauts on board the space station survive a catastrophic and bizarre event that occurs to them that nobody saw coming. So it's a very atmospheric video game. It's somewhat unnerving video game, and it's very heavy on things like deliberately withholding information and making you question what's going on. And it's made from a group of developers, some of which worked on Alien Isolation before breaking off to form their own studio. And this is the result of that game. So
that's some exceptional
Mungo.
Wikipedia there, Lewis.
It's a summarising. It's an on-the-fly summarising.
I know that was very good, and I loved your use of my comment as a segue. People will believe that we set that up, but actually you're just so quick and improvisational. You did it yourself.
Thank you. I'm glad you read that line out. So, Mungo, what did you think of Observation?
Well, it's funny, when you gave that introduction, it sounded like a game that I really want to play, and you made it sound really intriguing and good. No, I really didn't like Observation, if I'm honest. It's kind of interesting because I can sort of see why other people liked it. There was a lot of positive reception for it. But from my perspective, there are two main problem areas, which are the gameplay and the narrative. And the problem is that's what the game is, right? So we can get into these. We can explain. I can explain why I don't think the gameplay works and why I don't think the narrative works. And maybe you have reasons why. I would also be interested in why you recommended this game to me as well, and what appeals to you about this game.
So So you said you don't necessarily like the gameplay or the narrative. So let's start with something that hopefully we can both agree is good about this game, which is that I think the game looks really good.
Yes. So if we start with what's good, the visuals are very, very good, and I think that the general atmosphere are very good. So the visuals, it's an extremely high fidelity game. So it's leaning into the kind of realistic direction in terms of the character models and the spaceship models, and they really do. It really does look like a spaceship, and they've got a lot of effects as well in terms of you're an intelligence and you use cameras to look into what's going on. And it really looks like you're looking through a kind of maybe early 1990s CCTV camera that's been recorded on a VHS tape. The effects go a little bit too far, I think, sometimes in terms of like the sort of staticky stuff on your screen and the scrolling lines coming down with frames and things. There's a bit too much visual noise. It can be irritating at times. But it's incredibly atmospheric. The audio design is brilliant as well. You know, it's got a lot of very creepy, like string instruments and sort of screeching noises. They really managed to encompass that kind of alien feel brilliantly, as well as these kind of like vibrating, bassy kind of things, and so in that respect, it's very good. And I think if you were to watch someone playing it, like for a few seconds, and you didn't see their expressions they're playing it, you just kind of saw the game being played, you would probably assume that it's a very good game, or you might well get the impression that it's a very good game from this, because it looks brilliant. But if you watch more than a few seconds, you might actually begin to start seeing some of the problems with the gameplay.
Well, I think from the perspective of what it looks like, this is one of the main reasons I really love this game. I think this is possibly the most immersed I've ever been in a video game from the perspective of graphics, because I think the overlay of the as you say, like the visual noise from like the fact that you're using cameras, so like because you're playing as the operating system of this space station, so you see the space station through the lens of security cameras, through the lens of a little like research sphere that they've got. They can throw around the space station. It could be powered about via little jetpack jets, which I just thought was quite cute from the perspective of watching this little thing just bob around a spaceship. But there are times where, because that visual noise is layered over the game, my brain is automatically programmed to associate those sort of like visual mistakes in something as video footage of something that is real. So in like small graphical details that normally in a video game would make my head go, this is a video game, it's not real, it kind of tricks my brain into going, well, the reason that looks weird is because this is a videotape of a real thing. And then I'll have to go, no, it's not, it's a video game. So I think it's really, really clever use of a visual filter as a way to make the game more immersive. And as you say, when you bump into something, the camera glitches and causes more visual noise to appear. And again, that made me feel bumping into something more than most anything in a game. Normally when you walk into something in a game, you're like, what a mild inconvenience, I shall navigate around this box I have found. And whereas in this game, I'd bump into something.
In older games, you often you don't really feel like you've run into something at all, right? Like if your feet hit something and your camera's above your feet, you can just like stop or like slide a bit and you're like, what just happened? Oh, I walked into something.
Yeah. Well, especially because this is a game where the consequences of a lack of gravity are largely what you spend most of the game fighting.
Yes.
You spend a lot of this video game desperately trying to kill your momentum so that you can interact with something. So I think so from the off, sound and graphics, this game like grabbed me when I first played it, because I went, wow, I've never felt such a sense of place in a game. I've never felt so immediately and unnervingly in an actual location in a video game. And I think as well, there's particular sections in the game where you go outside the space station and into space, and I found those absolutely terrifying because the sheer, like, that whole idea of the vastness and uncontrollability of being adrift in space was very, very much sold to me, and I was like, oh my god, I do not want to go anywhere away from the space station. I am so scared of drifting into space forever.
Okay, well, I guess I can now understand more why you recommended this game to me. Like, if you want atmosphere, it does have atmosphere. That is something that is very very strong in this game. And it also, another thing that I would also recommend is the voice acting. I think is generally pretty good. It's a little bit of a mix because I think that there are problems with the story and script which become hard to distinguish from problems with the voice acting, which I'll go into a little bit more when we get into like the spoilers section. But definitely as a kind of your own character, you have a voice actor. You don't speak very much, but Sam has this sort of very neutral, appealing, kind sort of. It's very HAL from 2001: A Space Odyssey kind of computer bot voice, and I think that acting is fantastic. And the Emma Fisher, who is the chief science officer on the ship, the main protagonist woman, her voice acting is generally very good from the start. And then later on, I don't think the character works as well, and I think that it's more fundamental, the problems later on, than the acting.
Well, let's go now into like the main thing of any video game, which is the playing of the video game. We will get to the narrative, and we're going to put up a big spoiler there because I think this is a game that does have a big spoiler actually, and it's earlier than you'd think.
Yeah.
So the gameplay of this is you are playing as the space station, which I know to someone listening that doesn't make any sense what I've just said, but essentially you play as the computer that lives in the space station. So you can observe things through security cameras, you can open and unlock doors after achieving certain security clearances or solving certain malfunctions that have occurred on the space station, and you can also travel through the space station using a little sphere thing. And most of this game is basically trying to find things and then using the thing you've found to open a door largely.
Yeah.
So it's not a very action-packed game.
No.
It's pretty it does have puzzles though. It does have legitimate puzzles.
It does
that you
have
have
puzzles
to solve.
And so yeah, there are a lot of things that I can get into in terms of gameplay problems. So one of the earliest things that happens in the game that was a little bit of a warning sign, and I think kind of summarizes some of my problems with it, is right at the very beginning. Emma Fisher kind of wakes up and there's problems with the space station. She comes over to you, the computer, and she says authenticate with her own voice. And you have a choice of accept or reject, right? And you can either accept her into the system or you can reject her. And if you reject, then she'll try again, and then you can reject again, and then she will override, and her voice authentication wasn't necessary after all. She just needed to kind of key a number in, and then she's in charge. And this voice authentication happens, I think 3 times, maybe more, in the game. And every single time you can accept or reject. And if you reject, then you'll just be overridden. And it kind of sort of sums up this sort of sense of like, why is this even a video game? Right? Like, what additional, because you say we're playing as the space station, but I don't think that the metaphor of who you are as the computer was kind of properly resolved here. It's not really worked out what your agency is or what your functionality is there. So this, this authentication, Because you're a computer that can, in that one case of authentication, reject what the human characters have put in, and then you can get overridden. And in no other situation in the entire game can you reject them. You always just end up doing what you're told. So what's that?
Right,
what's
yeah.
the point? It's a very
Kieran,
strange way to get out of the door, I think.
So Mungo, I think the point of those sections is to emphasise that you do not have you do not have a choice. You are a computer. You can be overridden. You don't have agency. You are the operating system of a space station. If my computer locks me out because I forgot my password, I can navigate my way around that and unlock the computer.
Right.
There are ways to do that. There is, in fact, one instance in this game where that level of you denying a character does lead to, like, your agency as a computer is destroyed. Because I think a large portion of the point of particularly the lack of choices you have, despite the fact you are presented with choices, is that you are not playing as a consciousness that can make independent decisions. You are playing as the operating system of a space station.
The problem with what you're saying is what you're describing is the agency of a slave rather than the agency of a machine, right? So a slave might be able to say no, but will then get whipped and made to do the thing anyway. A computer does not have the capacity to reject people in simple... the thing is that you even do the authentication test yourself. So I think it would be more effective if you did the authentication test, and then if it fails, your only response is reject. And if it succeeds, your only response is accept. Because that's more like the way that a computer works. The computer doesn't have any choice.
Well, why does a computer accept or reject an input?
Because the input matches with whatever it needs to measure it up against.
So what determines whether or not the matching is accurate?
Well, you get told in the game whether it's accurate or not. And sometimes your systems are faulty. And they say, she's not Emma Fisher. And then you can choose to accept her or reject her. I think... So my argument in response to that is that essentially the way that a computer decides whether or not something is like authentic or inauthentic or like validated or invalidated is it uses an internal artificial intelligence. Mungo, you are that internalized artificial intelligence. You are the computer's intelligence trying to solve the problem. The fact you can be overridden is evidence of the fact that a computer can deny you, but you can still be overridden because as a computer, you do not have complete control or agency over everything that happens to you. So you are the artificial intelligence of the machine. It is your job to decide whether or not something is validated or not. And yes, you can be overridden. But I think, like any machine you've ever used, you always take the path of least resistance of, I'll use the voice authentication. And then when that doesn't work, you go, oh, sod it, I'll type my code in. Okay, I will park that point, because I don't think that we're going to... So there are a lot of issues. I don't know whether I should just kind of go through what the gameplay tries to do and then why it doesn't work. Maybe that's a way. So one thing that is really interesting about this game...
Let's keep it away from the plot.
Yeah.
Let's keep it away from the plot.
Yeah. There's plenty of things to discuss outside of the plot. One thing that's interesting about this game is this game was created or directed by the main UI artist on Alien Isolation.
Which massively shows, because this game looks like that game.
So I haven't played Alien Isolation. I think that there are kind of parallels with Alien. I was thinking about Alien actually as a film, to compare some of the story and character bits. But the fact is, like, this is made by a UI artist, and you can see the UIs are really compelling. There are a lot of really interesting looking UIs which have this kind of 1970s-esque sci-fi feel where everything's like it looks like it's the inside of a nuclear power station, like, or at least what I imagine the inside of an old nuclear power station would look like, right? One where they still haven't like introduced Windows XP yet. And
a really dangerous nuclear power station.
Exactly. And that's very appealing. And within the UIs, they can be fairly intuitive. So you can have a screen within one of your menus which explains like pressure status, on, coupling status, connected, blah, blah, blah. And you can read this out. But you have a lot of different tabs, too many different icons and elements to keep track of for what is on average 6 to 7 hour game, and then too many different like types of screens without proper explanation. It was weird to me, like playing this and thinking like a UI person has made this, because the UIs they look really cool, but like
they do,
the playing of it, like, they're kind of obtuse, like, and I would describe basically the whole game generally as obtuse. So some obtuse people might like it, right? But all these mini games are games about are games where someone will typically give you an unclear instruction, and then you will fanny about clicking on things and trying to see what's interactive until eventually you sort of stumble on working out what they were actually asking you to do, and then the making it work is a fairly trivial problem. Like, that was my experience of the game, which was very, very frustrating.
I would like to take this moment. I'd like to take this moment to be like, no, you're wrong. I had a great time with all the UIs. I was never confused. And no, I used a guide to complete this 6 to 7 hour game. I completely agree. There are moments in this video game where it's not unclear what you have to do. It is unclear how, like, what is a button you're allowed to press. I do think... This is the thing. I think they tried to do something that was a good idea that they didn't fully pull off, which is I think quite a lot of the interfaces are deliberately not user-friendly because they are not user interfaces for a human. They are user interfaces for a computer.
Yes.
But that is undermined by the fact that you have to interact with them as a human.
Yes. And this is where I think that the gameplay and the narrative really work against each other, actually, because... they've created all these computer... I totally agree with what you say. Like, they feel very kind of logic computer-esque, where it's sort of autistic, where, like, if you approached this and you knew exactly what the problem you were trying to solve was, then you can access what you want really easily. But if you don't quite understand the area, then they're really unhelpful. The problem with this from a gameplay perspective... and a narrative perspective, is that I'm now playing as a computer who has no clue how any computerized systems work, right? It's like that problem that I described with the Red Strings Club, where I'm meant to be a suave bartender and I spend all my time pouring vodka on the floor, right? And I'm meant to be a computer. I know that he's taken damage and there's a lot of strange things going on, but... It's this bizarre game. It kind of culminates in this very strange narrative experience where, like, the ship will be, like, breaking apart and a character will say, please, can you decouple this part from the ship? Because otherwise it's going to tear us apart. And then I'll be going, okay, I'm trying to do this, right? Blah, 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 I'm trying to do this. And then she's just, like, kind of silently standing in a corridor waiting as this absolute Muppet computer is and you know why they're doing that, right? The reason why they just stand around and wait for you is because if they got annoyed and kind of realistically was kind of stressing out, like, why is this computer just not responding in any way? Like, please, I'm going to die. Then that would make the game a hell of a lot more stressful and frustrating, because you would then be yelling at your screen, or I would at least. I would be then yelling at my screen going, it's not my fault. You haven't explained what I meant to fucking do.
It's true. I think it would be very entertaining to play a video game where you play as an unresponsive computer, and then the person using you, like, you're just about to figure out how to do something, and then the person, like, force closes it because clearly you don't understand what you're doing. So I'm going to force close it and then reopen it, and that'll make it work because you'll load it properly then, and you'll be there as a computer going, no, if you just left it, I just figured out what I was about to do. Sadly, that isn't this video game. This is a video game in which everybody expects a computer to just work.
I think the mistake, if they wanted to have it as the kind of frustrating, slow experience that it is, and I'm not quite sure that they had that in mind, is the mistake was making it too modern.
Aiming for that frustration.
Because if they'd set this game in like a 70s future, right? Because the spaceship's full of laptops and stuff, so you know that it's set now. The laptops look like modern laptops. They're really thin. They look quite light. If they'd set it in a kind of 70s style spaceship, right, like in Alien, where the computer's like a massive room and they have to type stuff in, then you would have more of an expectation that they would just sit around waiting for you to react. And maybe it could make like an old dialing tone kind of noise while you're playing. Like loading kind of thing. But as a modern thing, a computer would never be this slow. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think there is potentially a narrative explanation to some extent of what's going on, but I don't necessarily think it's the case that you're right. There is a disconnect between they ask the computer to do something like decouple, which also, like, once you figure out how to do it, it is not hard.
Yeah.
It's not like they've asked the computer to process a million equations, which of course would take a computer a long time. They're basically telling the computer, go into this part of the interface and press this button. And you as a computer are like zooming about the ship going, do I interact with this laptop?
So that decoupling is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. So I was playing this on the PC and I alternated between controller and keyboard and mouse because it always seemed like whichever one I was on, the other one was slightly less annoying. But I was trying to decouple, and I was given these. Ah, no, that's what it was. She was reading out a sequence of numbers, right? And it was the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 in order to authenticate something. And I had to put those numbers in, and I kept, like a complete idiot, pressing the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 and failing. And then, when I looked at the UI, I saw that what I actually had to do was press the keys W, A, S, and D, which had been linked to those numbers. And that's just bizarre nonsense to me. Like, why is like A 1 now? So when I switched it to the controller, it was really easy because I don't have a number 1, 2, 3, and 4 on my controller pad, so I could just press A, B, Y, X. That's fine.
So that will be a porting issue. That'll be consistency across consoles. It will be that they've mapped that to directional rather than literally making it 1, 2, 3, and 4 on your computer. But like that's a minor issue in the scheme of how the game works. Like you jumped to assume 1, 2, and 3, and 4 would work at a keyboard as opposed to
it's an example, Lewis. I'm not going to go through all of the points where these ambiguities happen, but there were a lot of cases that were like that. Now, for me, this is on average 6 to 7 hours. I completed this in less than 5 hours, and most of my playtime was spent either faffing around on the games, not really understanding them, or the much bigger thing was when I was a remote-controlled drone camera, I was lost, and this is where it's a really visually impressive space station, but it's so frustrating to play in because everywhere is massively cluttered. There are far too many things everywhere, so you can't tell straight off what things are or what's interactive or not. Like millions of laptops, but also masses of notes on the screen or on the walls, like documentation, and some of them you have to actually read for the game to continue. And so it all looks the same. It's all far too detailed. And you're also in 3 dimensions, with no gravity in this little drone, which also can't move up or down. You have to turn and you have to strafe left or right or turn around in order to go up, look up and down in order to move up and down. So I just spent so much time lost going, well, I know exactly which room I'm trying to get to, but I have no idea how to get to it because the map's not helpful. The map's, a 2D representation of the ship. And if I turn around more than once, I have no idea which door I'm facing again.
Yeah, no, I completely agree on this, actually. That would be my main concern with the observation, was I found most of my gameplay time was being lost, and as you say, not being entirely sure which objects are interactable. I think that is something that... I mean, that's something that's just easily fixed just by installing a better map, frankly.
Yeah.
If the map literally just showed orientation of which door I was facing, it would fix like half the problems I had with the video game. Because I agree, I spent most of my time largely bouncing around a space station going, I don't even know which room I'm in. And it takes quite a long time.
Yeah, you move very slowly as well.
Which I kind of understand, because I think if you moved quickly, it would both A, make it more difficult to control. It's already, as you say, floating in zero gravity. It's already reasonably difficult to control, and I think going quicker would just make me feel nauseous. But I don't know. Like, it's interesting that they create a game in which, you can, in theory, jump to any part of the spaceship at any time through the use of CCTV cameras.
Yeah.
But then they don't let you interact with things unless you take the little orb there. So there are instances where I would like scout ahead and go and look in the room I need to go to, and then be like, I think that's what I need, and then I'd have to get there as the little orb, and it would just be like, tumty 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 tum. Oh no, did I go left or right? Oh no.
So I think so. Two things. So one thing is, I believe that this game, and I may be completely wrong, had some excellent QA testing, so they know, it's functional. Like, it's not buggy, right? That's what I mean in terms of the QA testing. But I feel like this game probably didn't get enough play testing from an early enough stage, because I really don't know about the drones at all. Like, whether if you were just using cameras, right? And maybe you had like a little drone that could fly off when you're going to the outside bits. Or maybe they had outside cameras. Maybe you have a drone that you, like reusable drones that you can just release from any camera. So you don't actually have to like navigate. You only use the drone in like the specific cases where you need it locally.
That would be my solution, would be releasable drones in each room,
Yeah. I suppose, that's basically everything I have that's a problem with the gameplay. I mean, the minigames were interesting, some of them in what they were, but most of the game is just being lost.
I would say from I think when you're saying like they probably didn't test it in terms of like player experience, I think there's probably two things that happen in the development of this, and this is obviously speculation. I have no idea in the development of this what happened, but I think they got back a playtime of 4 to 5 hours and went, well, we can't make it any shorter. They probably thought, well, the fact that you have to go to all these rooms as the little drone, if you don't have that experience, the game becomes perfunctory almost. There's almost nothing to it. Like, you just go, look at that, interact with that, activate that, doop, 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 doop. And you could, without the little drone element, you could probably beat this game in 2 hours, 1 hour. Because a large amount of what you do in this game is quite simply interaction. And as you say, there are mini-games, but they're not particularly challenging mini-games.
No,
And there are puzzle elements. And there's some reasonably good puzzles in here. Certainly, I think the puzzles in this game are more interactive and require more thought than just like, click on a button, now it's done.
Yeah.
But they're not like massive head scratchers.
No.
That I don't think you'll ever. If you get stuck in this game, it will be because you're lost. It probably won't be because you won't know.
Well, it's all.
It will be because you don't know something's interactable.
Yeah, it's. Well, I also got frequently. I think that their instructions are very unclear. So you can ask them. You can say, "Oh, I didn't understand what you said," and then they'll just repeat a general instruction. So they'll say like, use the astrophysics computer in the Russian module or whatever. And then if you don't know how to use that you're just going, you ask them to explain, and then they just say, we use the computer in astrophysics. Like, I know the astrophysics computer in the Russian module or whatever it is, right? My problem is I don't really know what you're asking me to do with this, for example, that kind of thing. And that was...
Yeah.
That's often... it's often like there might be some people who like a puzzle where the puzzle is to work out what the puzzle is. But for me, I like a puzzle where I understand all the terms of the puzzle, and then I'm trying to work out something within that area. So,
Look, Mungo, some of us like Kafkaesque nightmares. Some of us want to be asked to do something they don't fully understand the processes of. I was going to say, I think your criticisms of the gameplay are more or less the same criticisms I have. And I'm not going to... Like, this is the thing. I sort of offered you observation not because I necessarily think it's the best game ever made, because I think you've probably played most of the games I really love. I offered you observation as a game you had never played.
Yeah.
And I didn't think you would have played, but I thought you would get something out of and you would find some enjoyment in. So,
I've
you were about to
certainly
suggest
had
we should
plenty of
discuss
things
narrative.
that I could critique. So that's it. A conversation anyway.
Yeah.
And I agree. Like I played a lot of games. It's this is a really interesting challenge, actually. Recommending a game to somebody who works in games and plays and researches games like regularly, just out of kind of professional curiosity and so on. So, you're right. Like a lot of the games that I'd be curious about, I would probably have already bought and then dipped into.
Yeah, yeah. And also, Mungo, for a video game, someone who's designed UX in video games, like, come on, this is a game that's just full of, like, UI and UX type questions. They're like this. Yeah. I've never played a game that felt like this video game. I've never played a game where I was presented the computer's perspective.
It is a very interesting challenge that they set themselves, and I would be very curious if anybody does something similar again. A game where you are the computer, and whether this is something that a different studio could tackle in a way that appeals to slightly less obtuse players.
It's an interesting problem because I feel like in terms of the goal of you're going to play this game as the operating system and as the computer, they very much, I think they really nail that experience of what it is like to see the world from the computer's perspective. What they don't necessarily nail is turning that into an experience that's a fun game that someone wants to play. I feel like there's like a slight... They've gone so hard on the immersive element of you interact as a computer that the like enjoyment element of and it's a fun and enjoyable experience. Like the Phoenix Wright games are about being a lawyer, but they cut the paperwork.
Yeah.
Like they introduce the interesting bit. Whereas quite a lot of this game, they don't cut the paperwork, as it were. They don't cut a lot of the minor interactions that take a long time. And as a result, there's a certain element of like, I don't know, like the immersion overtakes the fun, and to a certain level, once you do that, you will lose the player's attention to some degree.
Perhaps they could have approached it in slightly different ways with, maybe more of an earlier, at the beginning of the game, you're familiarized with systems, so you're given easy to do things with clear instructions in some kind of pre-game context, where you learn how to use all of these tools, and then you're able to use all these tools later. There's also an interesting parallel universe where somebody made a version of this game that was kind of open, where you're just a computer system that can do lots of different things, and then is given the opportunity to respond to crises in different ways. So what if you were a computer system that could just decouple any module, right, at any time? And what do you do then? I don't know. Maybe that's a terrible game. Someone would need to kind of explore that a lot more. But
that sounds like a computer sim game almost, like Sim Space Station, and you're just like, yeah, I'm just gonna remove oxygen from this room, see what happens.
Why not?
Yeah, they all die.
Oh dear. So, do you have anything more to say about the gameplay?
I think before we go into the plot, my general sort of feeling on saying to observation, to someone listening to this who's like heard what we've said so far, I do this every single time there's a game with a plot in it. I basically go, if you're interested, give it a go. Stop listening now. Observation is a game that has a very early reveal that isn't in any of the marketing, and isn't like, I've certainly had no idea this was part of the plot of the game. And it's probably the coolest thing in the game, I would say. So if you're vaguely interested, and you end up spoiling that element for yourself, I would say largely don't bother. If you go into Observation knowing the events of Observation, you're probably not going to get much out of it. But I would say not knowing the events of Observation makes Observation, or at least for me, made Observation a very compelling experience and made me want to finish it. And made me want to, like the central mystery of the game is at least presented in a very strong way once you get there. And I really enjoyed that element. So I would definitely say if you are vaguely interested in Observation and you think you might play it, I believe it's been on a few game services. I think it might have been given away on the Epic Game Store. I got it through PlayStation Now, so if you get PlayStation Now, it's on there. And I think it's also on Xbox Game Pass. So odds are you might well already own this game or have access to this game. And if what you've heard so far is interesting to you, go and play it. Don't listen to the rest of this podcast. It will ruin it.
Okay.
So Mungo.
So now I can spoil this. Now I can ruin to the story what I did to the gameplay. So the problem with the narrative, right, is I could summarize the narrative really simply, right? You're a space station.
Okay.
You teleported to Saturn or traveled there somehow, and there's a bunch of copies of your space station in which everyone goes mad and kills each other. And that's it. There's nothing... That's the whole thing, and there's nothing, like, deeper that you can particularly learn about yourself or any of these characters.
No, I think there's a bit more to it than that. It might just be that I'm reading into it. But also, Mungo, can we just start off with... You are teleported to Saturn, right?
Yeah.
That's the big early game reveal, is that you like, as a computer, you wake up, something's gone wrong, and then like an hour in or so, you get a shot, and it's I think an amazing shot of Saturn.
Yeah.
And you go, what the
Yeah.
Because I think, particularly because the game is sold as so realistic, like this is a space station that could exist. It uses existing technology. It looks realistic. I got very immersed because my brain's tricked by VHS quality video. And then suddenly you go, we're next to Saturn. Oh my God, we're next to Saturn. We're dead. We're so dead. There's no coming back from Saturn. You are like... over 100 years, like how many years is it to get from Saturn to Earth? It's like, it's not a lifetime, basically. You're never going home.
Yeah.
And that to me was like and also obviously the mystery is how on earth did we get to Saturn? Like what has happened to get us to Saturn?
And what had happened? It was magical, timey-wimey space stuff. That's why. Basically.
Well, Kind of. So as you say, you then also get the discovery of there are identical space stations to yours.
Yes.
Which is then like, that's not just like a plot reveal, that's like a large element of how the game works. You then go into an experience where you jump from one space station to another and interact with like alternate universes of other characters that the protagonist already knows.
And it's so frustrating because it's a really... I agree, like, when we turned up to be on Saturn, I was thinking, this is an interesting reveal. I'm interested to see where they go with this. And the idea of having lots of similar versions of characters, probably a lot of interesting things could be done with it. But in the end, you've just got space crazies. You know, that's all, like, there's some kind of alien force that makes everybody kill each other and then turn up to a thing which is just like a monolith in 2001. And it's just... So,
it's not space crazies, I don't think. I think them killing each other is out of survival instinct. Because I think what happens in... it's been a few months since I played it, but my memory of Observation in terms of why everyone's being killed is you go to the other space station... And during the course of the plot, you find out that the captain of the space station, his mission was to get the space station to a set of coordinates that had been sent to the Earth base, who are like, get this woman to these coordinates because we've received a transmission that has essentially requested that. And apparently we just fulfill requests when we receive them. We're like a radio DJ, but intergalactically. And and so his murdering of other people on the space station is because he's trying to survive on the space station because he knows there is not enough supplies, and he's going back to Earth base. He's like contacting Earth base and going like, I did my job, I got her to the place. You can't let me die. I'm going to survive this. You can't just kill me off. I'm not that unimportant, as it were. And he's also lived with the guilt of knowing that he's basically taking them into something that they might not come back from. I don't think it's necessarily that they know it's going to teleport them all to Saturn.
Yeah.
But it's an event that occurs like across realities because all of these space stations come from alternative dimensions.
Yeah.
And you are essentially playing as the station that makes it. You are the one space station out of all of the alternate realities. You're the one that gets Jenna Fisher onto the surface of Saturn and survive.
Yeah. I mean, so if we think about each of the characters as characters, then we can kind of see what we make of them. So you talked about Jim, the captain. So Jim is probably the most interesting. He has a kind of secret mission. So he's in charge of the space station, and has some secret mission that he's getting people to work on. And people have been complaining. This turns up in the audio logs. Like, people have been complaining about being given extra work, but they're not sure what it is, and it's to do with some secret mission from Earth or whatever. And then when he gets there, he's just dead in your own spaceship, and then in the other one, he's been killing
he doesn't
people.
make it in your one,
But
which explains why you meet him, because he's the version that survives.
Right, but the audio logs on the other space station are just saying, like, he's acting crazy, he's what's going on, right? Like, I don't get this sense of this being a desperation for supplies and things. There's no clues, unless I just happen. Did you run across clues, or is this a story that came together in your own head?
No, in my head, it's just that, like, that's the Jim that survives. That's, like, he's the one that makes it, because the idea is that all of these space stations come and all of them fail in some way. All of them, like, either have, like, a system failure, or the way the crew interacts means it doesn't succeed. And so by the time you get to where you are in the game, you've got two space stations, the one that you start on that makes it, but the space station is severely damaged and basically will not make it. It's going to fail. And you get supplies from another space station that's also about to fail, but the configurate, like, the sort of universal configuration of that spaceship is the Captain Jim decided the only way he was going to survive, because his motivations once he gets onto yours are to survive at any cost. He is completely determined that, like, he will do anything to survive, including killing people on your space station, including deactivating you as a computer, which I found a very alarming moment when I'm trying to, like, stop him from getting rid of me.
So I don't think it wasn't
he,
clear to me that his killing was motivated by survival, or how that worked as a survival instinct. His killing seemed quite arbitrary to me, and that was borne out in the audio logs I found, where people were just saying, like, "Oh, what's going on? He's acting very strangely and things." And I think that him killing to survive would have made him a more interesting character, actually. So maybe you kind of read this in a way that meant you had a better story experience when I played it through, and and I don't think it shouldn't be too expositional. I think if we look at Red Strings Club is an example of a game that wants to explain everything that's happened, right? And that is very unrealistic. whereas this game is leaning more into like let there be ambiguities. I think that's okay, but I don't feel like the creators knew what was going on with Jim because there would have been more of a sense, right, imagine that it was a thing about survival on that space station. Well, then the audio logs and the entries on the laptops and things could have been about, we've all been on here for weeks now and we're trying to work out what to do and blah, 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 and now there's more tensions and so on. And it could have been a lot like a Fallout vault, right? There are ways in which that story has been told very effectively. In Bioshock 1, for example, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. Whereas...
Well, Bioshock 1 is full of they are the crazies. Like, the whole premise is they injected themselves with blue juice and now they are the crazies.
Yeah, but they also came to the island under the sea, or whatever you call it. They came to Rapture because they did not want to live in normal society. It's this land of like extreme libertine, kind of indulgent, egotistical characters. Right. And these characters are a little bit more interesting in terms of their values and things. Like you have a guy who has this aesthetic about turning people into like Picasso style paintings, but real people, like mutilating them into them and things like that. So
yes, yeah,
I think they're a bit more interesting.
Look, you're going to get no argument from me that Bioshock has got more interesting characters and a better world. I think Bioshock is one of my all-time favourite games. But like, this has a certain element of like, I think for me. So look, this is going to be a huge excuse that you're going to say is absolutely not okay to give the game this much value, like this much leeway. But basically, you're right to say if you stop and think about the game and the characters, largely doesn't make sense. But it's very compelling. It's very compelling to find out what's going on, even though you don't really find out what's going on. From moment to moment. What I'm saying, Mungo, is this is an amazing game if you don't care about the ending of stories.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's fine. Yeah, I can't really disagree with that. Right? I mean, to me, it wasn't great through a lot of the experience of it as well, right? And I think actually, if I talk just a little bit about some of the other characters, I think I can show like other problems. So Emma herself. My issue with Emma is like she kind of starts out and you get this sense that she's sort of a fairly calm, perseverant, quite intelligent person, but then relatively early on, like after the weird stuff starts happening, she stops seeming to try to work out what's going on, and this is before even she's seen all these weird signs and the alien thing. She's changed. She says, "Oh, I'm different." Then she's like this kind of becomes this very bland character, and also because you are this stupid computer that can't do anything properly, or at least that's my experience of the game, then she in turn kind of some of your stupidity rubs off on her because she becomes somebody who just sort of stands outside of an airlock waiting for you to work out how to open it and not sort of looking on the laptops and like communicating constantly, texting on her phone to try and contact the others or whatever, right? Like looking up in a manual what's happening. Like I think that there would be, if she was a real clever scientist figure, she would be doing a lot of things to try and work out what's happening. And then I think that the turn with the looking into these signs and then she changes, it just feels like such a cop-out because then she's allowed to have a complete character shift to then she's like a zombie, like later on. She's just like very bland, totally lost all of her curiosity. She just wants to get to the Saturn so something happens, right? So that something can happen. And that's like, well, her character doesn't make any sense at all, right? And the excuse is, well, she saw some symbols from some alien thing. And you don't know anything about the alien thing. You see the symbols and they change you. They turn you into a murderer. And it's just like, it's like if you take any 10-second slice of the narrative, it could be quite a compelling 10-second slice. But if you if you try and put the slices together, if this was a film, it would be an absolutely terrible film. Like if 2000,
it'd probably be Prometheus.
If you compare 2001: A Space Odyssey, all the two astronauts and the computer in that, they all have their own reasons for what they're doing, and there's also, even though the aliens in that could have changed Hal, and he could be doing something with the aliens, there's a kind of in-universe explanation of what Hal's doing anyway, and there's alternate explanations as well. So Hal makes an error, and then the people pick up on the error, and then they see that he's done something wrong. And you might think that Hal kind of kills them out of fear that they're going to shut him down. You might think that Hal has some kind of self-preservation instinct, which is about preserving its own ego. So it's like, I can't be someone who's made mistakes. This must be somehow the human's fault, right? Or it might be something else that the monolith creators have inspired. So, yeah, that's my issues with the narrative. And then
that's your analysis of 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, I'll just throw that in there for free, And then at the end, you get to your own equivalent of a monolith, and there's a whole lot of figures, shadowy figures in the background who are probably other versions of Emma, and she floats up, and she's joined, and then oh no, the real end is you back on Earth, and you're her, and you're going to absorb everyone,
yep.
and it just.
You're her and Sam in your emerged consciousness.
Yeah. And
it says, and then it ends on the final instruction, which is bring them.
Bring them.
Which, the first instruction you get in the game is bring her. So the implication is you are now going to bring everyone on Earth to the hexagon on Saturn, where they will be merged into a single consciousness, was what I interpreted it as.
Yes, and that's what I interpreted it as well. Yeah.
And I think there's sort of the implication. So I feel like the point of this game was, what if you played as the villain in a sci-fi movie?
Yeah.
What if you played as the murderous computer that turns against the crew? Because from a certain perspective, that's basically what happens to Jim. Jim is basically desperately trying to get back home to Earth without being killed, and then the computer kills him.
Yeah.
And not by accident.
And while you're shutting all the doors, he just stands in the room and goes, "Don't shut the doors." And it takes you 3 whole minutes.
I mean, to be fair as well, just to link back to a minor point you made earlier, I think the authentication sections where you can authenticate and either approve or deny are also done to instill a sense of paranoia in the player, because once you learn that there are doppelgangers, you then have to go oh no, I don't want to let a doppelganger in. Yeah. Do I not want to let a doppelganger in? What are the doppelgangers? The way the game withholds information from you at different stages of the narrative. This is what I mean by it's really compelling to play rather than to read, because if you read it, the solutions to all of your questions appear immediately. Whereas when you're playing it, there are illusory decisions, not real decisions, illusory decisions that you are making as a computer, where you're I don't want to make the mistake of getting everyone killed.
Yeah. It reminds me, I feel like it's a lot like a kind of Doctor Who episode where, you can get kind of interesting concepts, but also if somebody tries to think about it too much, it can just be very frustrating.
Yeah. It's a game that's nearly about something, but then actually isn't about anything.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a cool idea in here, and I feel like I'm someone who does like ambiguity in a story. I prefer stories that end on a question mark rather than a full stop, and leave you to think about what might have happened. And there's a certain element of that to this, but it does also feel more like, you're right, they don't really want to explain what the thing on Saturn is, other than to make it scary and unstoppable. And they don't end on the right question. The right question for this game to end on would not be what is going on and what is going to happen. The correct question to end on would have been what is going to happen, not what is going on. Because you kind of need a little bit more. You probably need to explain, at the very least, what the heck is the hexagon a conscious element? Is the hexagon like, what has caused the events of this to happen? Not necessarily like full-blown motivations or anything like that. We don't necessarily need to know like the alien race that created the hexagon. We just need to know, is the intention of the alien that you end up meeting to like conquer Earth? Is the intention of the alien that you meet to actually bring peace, and it's hopefully going to make everything better? But at the very least, we need to know what it wants.
We want more of a sense of the motivation of the humans as well. What was this whole mission for? I mean, if it's just discovery? I think that the discovery element of Alien, right, works better because you know that Wayland, even though it's not like highlighted, you know that Weyland-Yutani is a corporation which is like somehow closely connected to a highly authoritarian government, possibly a dictatorship. And like you have this sense of this, like in the kind of theming of the film, and so. And this is just a mining ship, right? It's some random people who happen to have come across, or seem to have happened to have come across this signal. And so the corporation and the government have just sent completely expendable people and a single android. And they're going, okay, we'll just capture this alien and we'll bring it back somewhere like where then more capable people can presumably board the ship and like isolate it and take it for themselves, right? We only need the alien to be on the ship long enough that it sets course back to the solar system. And that's sort of that we sort of get what the people are about. We don't particularly know what the alien's about, but that doesn't matter in Alien. In this case,
well, the aliens in Alien are just animals that don't want to die, and like from a certain perspective,
just a very hungry boy.
The story of Alien, the story of Alien is a young adult is kidnapped by an alien race and then proceeds to desperately try and escape.
And they try and set it on fire. Oh God!
Yeah,
they're throwing out an airlock. Poor little alien.
It becomes a mother during the process, like from the perspective, that is literally in this Wikipedia article. Part of the inspiration of this game was if you look at Alien from the perspective of Alien, the alien's done nothing wrong. The alien is terrified and is trying to like survive this kidnapping.
Yeah,
but the people kidnapping it don't even realize they've kidnapped it. So, I think you're right to conclude that if you put together this jigsaw, it's 5 different jigsaws that don't really click together. But I think, if I'm to argue the game's case, the journey's more important than the destination. Like, I feel like minute to minute, the story of this game is really, really compelling. And while it's a trick, while it turns out to be a sleight of hand trick, and there's nothing actually there, there isn't really any satisfying answers. The journey of having those questions is really interesting and I found exciting.
Well, okay then. In the minute-to-minute of this bumbling drone that doesn't know where it's going, it's wandering around a kind of interesting, if incoherent space. I think, there we go. So I think I can give my kind of my thumbs up or thumbs down now. So is Observation? I forgot the name of the game just now. Is Observation the best game that I've ever played? No. Now I can use the same logic we've done on a previous episode. I can say now that I've played it, it's not a game that I've never played. But it's also, I would say it ranks fairly low amongst games that I have played. Actually, in my estimation.
Wow. Well, tell that to the 16 British Academy Game Awards who gave this Best British Game. I don't really know what else was nominated. It also won in the British Academy Scotland Awards. It won Best Game. This is the best game Scotland made in 2019, Mungo. So if Scottish games aren't going to do it for you, I got to go look elsewhere. I got to find out.
Well, if you enjoyed that, I would recommend Stories Untold. I also played Stories Untold, which I had kind of mixed feelings about, which is the predecessor to this game by the same studio. It's also horror, but it's a kind of mixtape compilation of horror vignettes which are tied together. I think maybe slightly more coherently. It's very similar in many ways. I think the gameplay is also probably better. So if you give that a go, then that's an interesting alternative.
All right. Well, thank you for coming back on. I'm disappointed I didn't find the best video game you'd ever played. I'll be honest, I'm not massively surprised. Because it's hard to find games you haven't played that aren't just new games. But I think at the very least, Observation is an interesting video game.
Yeah.
I like finding video games that I don't think are like other video games, and I don't think this is like another video game. Albeit, you could categorize it as a type of walking simulator, and apparently I like those a lot more than I thought I did. So there we go. But thanks for coming back on, Mungo.
It was
and
lovely.
I hope you find better games to play in the future.
Thank you. Well, I feel a little bit guilty. I feel like I sort of killed your baby. But yeah.
No, it's fine. You've killed Scotland's Rose. Okay, that's what you've killed. Well, there we go. That was Mungo Tatton-Brown talking about Observation. Sadly, not a video game that he thought was the best he'd never played. But I had a great time talking to him about it. I found the game really fun and interesting. Maybe after listening to this, I mean, you know every single plot detail, so I would say realistically, there's no real reason you should play it. But I had a really good time with it, and I'll definitely be keeping an eye on the studio to see what else they put out in the near future. If you like this podcast, please leave us a nice review on iTunes or all the other places that you can leave nice reviews for podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter, @GameNeverPlayed. I actually bothered to sit down and change how the podcast is listed because the previous handle was appalling. And you can also find this podcast at pod.link/bestgame to find all the different places that you can listen to it. We're on Spotify, we're on iHeartRadio, we're all over the place. There's no place you can't get this podcast. Frankly, I don't know why I'm telling you this, because if you're listening to the end of the podcast, you found the podcast. Stay safe, everyone.